The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Tell me, do I look like a guy who looks like he has it going on? Yeah, I do. I got it going on. How you doing? It's Thursday night, July 25th, 2024. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. on the West Coast, 11 a.m. in Singapore, 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Sydney Opera House in Sydney, Australia. And here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 10 o'clock Central Daylight Time. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, episode number 140, if you're keeping score at home. Now, I got some news. Next Wednesday is our 1 year anniversary. We started on July 31st, 1919. Yeah, I did. I started in 1972. What the hell? Yeah. So, we started 2023, July 31st. Our first guest was Murray Sabrin. I'm going to see if we can get him back. Maybe we might not be able to get him back on Wednesday, but we'll get him back. He comes by here every 6 weeks or so, talks about the economy. He's an economist, tells us how we're all going to hell. And we are. We know it. We know it. We know. So what's going on tonight? I bet you want to know. Jonathan Tobin, the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. I mean, all week I've been saying Jewish News Service. I'm wrong. It's the Jewish News Syndicate. He's dropping by. He's going to be live, and we'll take your questions and phone calls for him. You can Blog Talk Radio is up and running. The telephone number is 563-999-3435. You can call in with your camera. You go to jimanite.com/call. It's all down here at the bottom. It's scrolling by. So it's very simple too. You just go to that webpage, click the big blue button on the top of the screen, and your camera and mic are you get to preview what we're going to see, and you're in the queue. It's simple. The whole thing's really simple. But I've learned after doing this for a year, most of you do not want your picture on the screen. That's why we get way more callers to the audio line, which surprises me. This is the very first talk show in America to take live video phone calls. Not me saying that. Talkers Magazine said that. So we got it going on. Like I said. So tonight, Jonathan Tobin, we don't do Fridays here. We don't. And besides, tomorrow, the 26th is my mother's 100th birthday, and she's been on the show before, and I'm going to have her on for her 100th birthday again. And so we have a big celebration planned for Saturday. But I would take off tomorrow, even if we weren't even we had a show, but we don't. Monday, it's our month in review panel. That's Tim Conaway, Don Zorro, Larry Newman, depending who can show up. It's like maybe Frank, maybe Sammy, who knows? I don't know if that means anything to you. See, let me explain it. All right, when the Rat Pack was making Ocean's 11 in Las Vegas, they performed every night at the Sands Hotel, even while they were making the movie. And the marquee for that entire time was 8 weeks or something. Read Rat Pack, maybe Frank, maybe Sammy, maybe Dean, because they came in and out. See, that's pretty much what we got on here too. So I actually don't know who's showing up yet. I don't. That's what we're going to do. Tuesday night, got a guy named Tom Palladino. He's a scalar light researcher. I barely know what that means. I don't even know what that is. So we'll find out together, huh? That sounds good. No, I'll do a little research over the weekend. I'll figure out what's going on. But he's coming on Tuesday, and Wednesday, it's our big 1 year anniversary show. I know Santa. We delayed Santa from last week. Santa's coming on the 1 year anniversary show. That's a good place for him to be. Jeff Meyer's coming on too, I think. He's our sponsor, Conch News. So yeah, things are going on here. And speaking of Conch News, They are a sponsor, and this is the front page of Calling News right now in real time. And I wanted to point something out here. You can't see my cursor. I keep forgetting that. Um, well, first of all, this is really interesting. This is an article on hot air, and I have referenced this when we talked to Jonathan Tobin. It says Democrats really have a problem with Jews. No shit. Really? We'll talk to him about that. So, this is also interesting. Oh, and I know this reminded me of that. I think this is the New York Post. Now you'll notice here on Clock News, there's little icons on the bottom left corner of every story. They're not very large, but those icons are the icons or the brand trademarks of the website that is hosting the story. If you click on the icon, you go directly to the front page. Like this, like the one on the top left, Democrats really have a problem with Jews. That's hotair.com. You click on that little flame on the bottom left corner, and you go right to the front page of Hot Air. If you click on the photo or the headline, you go directly to that story. That's the reason this is so cool. So what Conk News does is they take their news aggregator. They take stories from 75 different news websites. Every 3 hours, their servers go out and find out what's new. Any story they haven't previously referenced, they grab, they bring them back, and relay out the front page. This is all automated. Happens all in real time, as we speak here. So the newest stories are at the top, but the thing is, unlike most other news aggregators, they're all mixed together. It's like it's not the top stories from Hot Air or the top stories from the New York Post. And I was going to bring that up because I think there's no icon for the middle top story about Obama's instincts that Kamala isn't a winner. I think there's a few the few news sources that do not have icons, and I know from experience, New York Post is one of them. So I'm guessing that's where that's from. But any rate, the thing, most news aggregators, they will list the top stories from each news organization separately. Conk doesn't do that. It mixes them all together. So it's the closest thing you'll get to a traditional newspaper, basically, if you like that sort of thing. And I'm old, and I do. So I worked for this organization. I'm very happy, proud of my association with it. I was the editor for a few years. So you can't get a better news source than this. Now the amazing thing is too, like I said, they do this every 3 hours, so you can go back, you can read. There's enough stories on this page here to keep you busy. Even if you click through only to a few of them, you can read here 2-3 hours easy. You come back 5 hours later, 80% of the stories have changed, and all the old ones are at the bottom of the page. And speaking of the page, you don't have to log in to see this. You don't have to register. You don't have to subscribe. There's no charge. Just go to conk.com. That's CONK.com. Conk.com, the best news source on the internet, period. I'm not kidding. Check this out. I use it all the time. And I'm going to keep this up here for a second because the article in the middle from the New York Post reminded me of something I read today. And I can't remember where I read it. I did not put this in my show notes about the fact that Biden basically coronating Kamala Harris as soon as he stepped down. There were two separate tweets, but still, they were only a couple minutes apart. And I know for historical purposes, he wanted to keep them separate, I'm sure. But he basically endorsed Kamala as soon as he quit the campaign, minutes later. And somebody, a big donor for the Democrats, said that was Joe's FU moment to the Democrats for forcing him out, because this guy says Joe knows that Kamala's going to lose, so that he did that basically out of spite. And that's also the reason that Obama has so far not endorsed Kamala, because he thinks she's going to lose too. So, and of course, what is the point? I'm no Biden fan, but he is absolutely right about this. Of all the people who could possibly have ran in that spot, he was still polling better than all the rest of them, even though he was losing to Trump. He was still polling better. So it's, I just find that kind of interesting. That was his idea of fuck you. And I can say that because we're not on actual airwaves. Now that might change in the future here too. We're talking to people about running the show maybe on the radio. So we'll see. That'd be real terrestrial radio. We'll see about that. So Jonathan Tobin's coming on in a few minutes. Uh, so what do I got? Okay, so this timing is very fortunate. I mean, I did not know, and I don't think Tobin knew that Bibi Netanyahu was going to give a speech to Congress yesterday when we booked him, and I think we booked him about a month ago. I think I don't think it was planned. So we got like like Hugh Grant showing up on Jay Leno. We kind of just got lucky, and I don't want to compare Jonathan Tobin to Hugh Grant, but that's kind of what happened here. So yeah, he gave what's called a masterful speech. But we'll talk about that with Jonathan in a few minutes. And we also talked about this, but I'm going to talk about this right now. So of course there were also if you want to call them protests in Washington D.C. about Bibi showing up at Congress yesterday. Somebody said that I think this was oh God. This was a Republican representative in Congress in the House who said these are not protesters, they're terrorists. And so Beej Wellborn wrote this article on Hot Air. She wrote the article we were pointing to at on the Calling News website there. She wrote that. And I don't know Beej, even though I know a lot of people at Hot Air. I've never talked to her, but she's a fantastic columnist. The the town hall properties, man, you can't do much better for writing. You really can't. You got Strom and Jazz Shaw and Ed Morrissey and Beej here. That's just on Hot Air itself. You know, and then you go to Red State, which is maybe arguably the most famous of the 6 of those properties. But at any rate, so a lot of people have been talking about the fact that Beej talked about them and how utterly sick this made her. And there's a point here, you know, about the fact this is no longer protesting because they're in front of of Union Station in Washington D.C. Now Union Station is a working train station, even though there's a huge like mall inside of it. So a lot of people go there, even though they're not catching a train, but it is a working train station. And if I'm right, I think it's a federal property too, if I'm correct. I'm not sure about that. But so there's American flags flying in front of it, and the protesters came and they pulled the flags down and they burned the flags on the ground, and then they put up Palestinian flags on the flagpoles. They actually strung them up. I mean, I'm not talking about, you know, like hanging there. They actually replaced the American flags with Palestinian flags. And Beej brought up a really good point here. It's legal in America to burn an American flag. It's not legal to steal one to burn it. Those flags didn't belong to those protesters. They stole them off of the flagpoles and then burned them. And nobody's brought this up. I'm bringing this up myself. Isn't it? It's literally an act of war to pull down somebody's flag off a flagpole, off a federal flagpole, and put up another country's flag, isn't it? I mean, as far as I know, that's a sign of conquer. That's literally a sign of war. That's an act of war. And this is crazy. And besides the fact, all these protesters, they all went around and they completely mutilated a whole bunch of federal landmarks, uh, spray paint. You know, just it was terrible. And I'm getting tired of it too. And nothing ever happens. And the amazing thing is, four or five of these protesters were arrested. They were let go today. Of course they were. You know, because if you're on the Democratic side, you don't see any charges ever, and that's of course why these people do this because they know that's going to happen. I mean, it happened. You know, people talking about the insurrection on January 6th. And first of all, David Strom put this better than anybody that I know. It wasn't an insurrection, if only because an insurrection is what you do if you want to topple a government. The people who stormed the Capitol had no idea of toppling the government at all. First of all, they had no weapons. You know, not a single person in that crowd had a firearm. Now, I don't know if that was chance or if that was because they vetted those people before they came into the rally. 500,000 people came down to the mall to see a whole bunch of people, and then Trump spoke at the end. But I've said this before. If Trump hadn't shown up, that riot at the Capitol still would have happened because people don't understand what's going on here. It had nothing to do with Trump. These people, I mean, these rioters, they were pissed off about what happened in the summer of 2020, that summer before, where billions of dollars of damage was done and at least 20 people were killed and nobody saw any consequences to it. Matter of fact, our current vice president, who's running for president now, she started a bail fund to get people out of jail here in Minneapolis. I mean, she's very proud of it too. I'm sure I'm guessing they will bring that up at some point, you know. So this is starting to become, it's just bullshit. I mean, I can't put it any other way. Jonathan Tobin is here. We're going to talk to him. Okay. Here's 12 seconds of bumper music. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And I can hear you too. How are you?
Thank God, I'm okay.
Where are you, may I ask?
I'm outside of Philadelphia, where I live.
Okay, very, very cool. How long have you been the editor of the Jewish News Service?
I have been editor of JNS, which is syndicate, not service, but that's fine.
I'm sorry, yeah, I keep saying it wrong.
JNS.org. I prefer just people saying JNS.org so that they'll go to the web, go to the URL. I've been at JNS since 2017, late 2017. Before that, I was at Commentary as an editor. So
very cool, very cool. So I got a list of stuff to talk about here. First thing is Netanyahu's speech to Congress. It was generally regarded as very good. Is that the way you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great speech. The question is, who's listening?
Yeah.
Who's going to heed it? And obviously today's meetings with Biden and especially Kamala Harris, who came out with a very interesting, statement of her positions, very carefully crafted to be on both sides, both the pro-Israel side and the critical of Israel side. So, I don't think it made much of an impression on her.
Okay, so let me, if you don't mind talking here for a couple of minutes, let me explain my personal position here, and I just want your comment on it. I'm a former liberal. I do not consider myself a liberal anymore. I was always for the two-state solution, always 20, 30 years ago, until Ishak Rabin and Yasser Arafat showed up at the White House in December 2000, and Bill Clinton said, well, let's fix this once and for all, right?
Yeah, Barak, actually. Rabin was already dead. But...
Oh, I'm sorry. Who was it?
It was Ehud Barak.
Okay, sorry about that. I got that wrong. Okay, so all right. So they're talking. They spent a couple of weeks there, and basically Barak and Clinton gave Arafat everything he wanted, basically. And he still said no. And so...
and then a no again, and right. Abbas continues
to
say.
And Clinton is wondering what the hell's going on. I got the impression from his biography that he didn't realize till later that basically if Arafat agreed to this, he would be out of a job.
Well, Arafat said, I'm dead. But, Clinton wanted his, Clinton, and I've heard him speak of it. I heard him speak of it in person as well as, I think he even wrote it. It's like he was already polishing up his Nobel Peace Prize speech.
Yeah.
And he never got over that. He was really mad. And of course he was right to be mad at Arafat. I remember among the best interviews I ever did in the whole course of my career as a journalist was a couple of months after that, in October of 2000. I interviewed Israel's, foreign minister, Shlomo Ben-Ami, who was Barak's #1 person, and who had crafted all this stuff. And by then, not only had Arafat said no, but the Intifada had started. He answered with war, with a terrorist war. So, and by this time, Barak and he and everybody in his government, they were dead men walking. They were finished, and within the year they would be finished. And I asked him, so how does it feel? You laid it on the line, and they just said no. They didn't want any part of it. And he said, well, it was very disappointing. It's like a line from Woody Allen's Bananas. And but he said, never again will Israel can anyone ever accuse Israel of not wanting peace, of not doing everything it can to make peace. and which side is rejecting peace. Now, here we are 24 years later, nearly 24 years later, and you think about that statement about that rejection of peace, and you don't know whether to laugh or cry.
Yeah. Well, also, it seems like most people just forgotten about this. I mean, I know
All
that,
of it.
you know,
All of it, and all the rejections since then as well, and what Hamas stands for, which is, just basically destroy Israel, genocide of the Jews.
Yeah, and that's the other thing here too. Everyone seems to think there's some sort of equality of the positions here,
which is the whole point of when Harris came out today and said, this isn't a binary issue.
Yeah,
and it's like, yes, it is, which was a direct refutation of Netanyahu, who said this is a war between civilization and barbarism. And that is not her position at all. And that's the problem.
And it is a war between civilization and barbarism. I mean, as far as I can tell, and anybody else who looks at this, Hamas's only real goal in life, if you want to, collectively as people, is to kill Jews. They don't seem to have. They've had Gaza for 14 years. They haven't done any real building up of infrastructure of their society.
Oh, they built up the infrastructure. It wasn't for the civilians.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They built the New York subway system underneath.
Yeah,
it's not like they can't get things done.
Right. No, that's right. But
they can build stuff.
It wasn't for the citizens, right?
Right. I always say, like people complain that the Palestinians don't have bomb shelters, and it's like, yes, they do, but the bomb shelters are for the bombs.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where my personal position has evolved over time. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. Let me ask you, what's happened with these kids on campuses? I mean, I have to say before you go on, I have been laughing on this show. I made a huge joke about Queers for Palestine because it's the stupidest goddamn thing I've ever heard. And then Bibi on the Congress yesterday, he put it one better. I think he has Gays for Gaza, and I thought that actually has a better ring to it.
yeah, Gays for Gaza is like chickens for KFC. Yeah. Well, and the reaction from the left was, how dare he say that? That's so insensitive and so wrong. And doesn't he know that they're, it's like, the answer, why is this happening on college campuses? Why are this happening on the streets of Washington and many other cities? It's intersectionality. It's critical race theory. It's woke ideology, the whole DEI mindset, which, divides us by race, and, an immutable, irrevocable race war, and defines Jews as white oppressors, is Jews and Israel as white oppressors. That's why no matter what Israel does, Israel's in the wrong, according to these people. And no matter what they do, the Palestinians and Hamas, whom the Palestinians support overwhelmingly, don't buy that. That they're always in the right. So there it is in a nutshell. That's our problem. It's at the root of so many of our problems in this country. Not just obviously, it's part of my beat. It's why Israel is treated so badly. That's why we have this massive surge in anti-Semitism from the left, but it's also at the root of all of our problems as a country. This war on civilization. I mean, it really relates. When Netanyahu says it's civilization versus barbarism, well, our college campuses are waging a war on civilization.
Yeah, and I don't. Forgive me, and I'm just an average person here, just sitting here, and I don't understand. I mean, first of all, this is anti-Semitism, plain and simple. And you'd think after, World War II and 70 years of that, you'd think it'd pretty much be gone. And now it's raised its ugly head. And you also write it's against civilization. And we have a faction of Americans in this country who basically trying to destroy civilization. And first of all, I don't understand the end game. Do you?
Yeah, it's Marxism.
Yeah, but okay. but the thing is, but Marxism has never worked.
Yeah, that's true. But, it's never been tried the right way.
That's right. I forgot. You're absolutely correct. That's right. That's right. Yeah, everyone else done it wrong. We can do it right this time. That's right. I totally forgot about that. That's right. Oh, my God. So what happens to Jews in the United States? Now, first of all, I don't understand how any Jewish person now could be a Democrat. I don't get that.
Well, most of them still are.
Yeah, and I understand that. Historically, I understand that's true. But why is that? You'd think after...
Well, that's I think Norman Podhoretz wrote a book about it, a while back. Listen, it is in this country, the social justice aspect, Judaism is composed of two separate, compatible, but very different elements. One is the universal and one is, the particularistic. Jews believe in a universal God and universal justice. That's the Torah, that's the Bible. But we're also a people with a land and a particular set of laws that applies just to us. In the United States, the balance got tilted, where we have, sort of most Jews who are liberal, mostly secular. They, the universal element of Judaism just overwhelmed the particular. And that's now, added on to, in 21st century America, the third decade of the 21st century, where politics now plays the role that religion used to play in most people's lives. So therefore, they root for their partisan affiliation is the most important thing. Statistics about intermarriage, in the 1950s, I love to quote this when I give speeches. In the 1950s, when Gallup polled about your attitudes towards intermarriage, interracial, interfaith, most overwhelming majorities were against it, by large majorities. Certainly interracial marriage, which was like very, remember, it's still the Jim Crow era, and interfaith marriage as well. Today, those numbers are, the opposite. Even interracial, very few people will admit to being against interracial marriage, whether they are or not. Very few people are against interfaith marriages, and that's played out in the statistics, Jewish as well as every other group. But in the 1950s, when people were asked, how do you feel about your children marrying someone from a different political party? The overwhelming majority said it didn't matter. Republicans and Democrats were both Americans. They weren't that different. They were both large coalitions of disparate groups. Today, the same number of people, the same percentage of people that oppose interracial, political marriages, political intermarriages, it's the same as the number of people who opposed interracial marriages in the 1950s. The vast majority of Americans would never marry, if they're Democrats, they would never marry a Republican. And vice versa, and for the most part, vice versa. And that's how people live. I mean, and it's, we live in these silos, defined by our social media, where we isolate ourselves from different points of view. We watch, listen, and read different sets of media, so nobody agrees. It's like if you read liberal media this week, Kamala Harris is Joan of Arc, and Madame Curie all rolled in together. Like they went from all, it's like a month ago, Joe Biden is fine, to Joe Biden when it was no longer in their interest, then Joe Biden's got to go. And now it's just Kamala Harris is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And everybody who's a Democrat, and the majority of Jews are Democrats for various reasons, they react to this. It's like the way people, root for baseball teams.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld famously said that we don't root for players, we root for laundry. You root for your team. Some guy could be on a different team next year. You're not rooting for him.
Yeah.
You're rooting for your team, for the laundry. They will vote for whoever the Democrats put up. They will treat whoever the Democrats put up as a genius. They will hate whoever the Republicans are. And of course, Donald Trump is hated even more than most.
That's right. Yeah. Now, and when I said
J.D. Vance has learned, as Mitt Romney learned, Mitt Romney is now like, they love him. Mitt Romney was called Hitler. George W. Bush was called Hitler. It's just a difference of kind. It's just a matter of degree of how Trump is treated.
When I was saying before that I don't understand why a Jewish person would be a Democrat now, I understand historically why they are. But the thing is, you're literally talking about a party that at least a faction of it actually hates Jews. I can't wrap my mind around that. See,
well, it's difficult for Jewish Democrats to deal with that, but they rationalize it. Not everybody on the Republicans is perfect, but the Republicans are a lockstep pro-Israel party. The two parties have exchanged identities on Israel over the course of the last decades. I mean, the Republicans, there was never much of an anti-Israel, we hate Israel faction of the Republicans, but maybe the majority of them were just indifferent to it. They didn't care.
Yeah,
Like read
that's
National
right.
Review in the 1950s and 60s. There was nothing about Israel. They didn't care what happened to Israel.
Right.
That changed, and changed because of evangelicals. It changed because of the Cold War. I mean, it changed for now. It's like Thomas Massey is the only anti-Israel Republican
Yeah.
in Congress.
Uh-huh.
It's it, and and he's this radical libertarian. That's his shtick. But like the Democrats, all the energy, all the the progressives are, some of them are open anti-Semites and open Israel haters. Some are just so critical of Israel that and that's kind of where it's close to that, and some are just I like Israel in theory, but I don't want it to do anything to defend itself.
And what do you think about? Do you buy this thing about the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism?
No.
I don't know if I buy it.
No. It's listen. If you are an anti-Zionist, you are denying to the Jews rights that you would not deny to anyone else. Zionism is the movement for Jewish self-determination, the right of the Jews to live in their ancient homelands, live in peace and sovereignty and security, defend themselves. You don't deny that to any, there's no international movement to not deny those things to any other people living on their homeland. Only the Jews. The Jews are singled out. So, if you are, so it's a form of discrimination. And, as our friends, the lawyers would say, the term of art for that is anti-Semitism. It's very clear.
Yeah. No, I agree. The other thing I don't understand too is people who basically want to like eliminate Israel literally. So you've got a group of people here in 75 years, actually probably in 40 or 50 years, they built a fantastic civilization, this small piece of dusty land. I mean, Tel Aviv is one of the great cities in the world.
Yeah, and it was founded in 1914, in 1910.
Yeah.
It's the only great city of the world that's only a century old.
Right. Well, I could say Los Angeles. Yeah, I know.
Well, Los Angeles does date back further, but I mean, there was something there.
No,
but okay.
Yeah,
America is different.
No, that's true. That's true. That's kind of my point. So, but the thing is, so you've got this beautiful city here, and then you've got these the queers for Palestine, and who, if they actually went to Palestine, they'd be thrown off roofs. And the thing I find really funny is that Tel Aviv is easily one of the top 5 most gay friendly cities in the world.
Oh yeah, I mean,
so you want to go over there, huh?
Listen, gay Palestinians leave, Judea and Samaria and Gaza if they can, and go to Israel.
Yeah, I know that.
And many of them live illegally, whether they have rights to live there or not. So, but again, this whole intersectional, critical race theory, woke vision of the world, the Jews are the bad guys. The Jews are the white oppressors, even though, the conflict between Jews and Arabs isn't racial. Jews and Arabs are the same race. It's nuts.
Yeah.
By the definitions of the American left, the majority of Israeli Jews are people of color because they trace their origins, not just the Ethiopians, but people who trace their origins to North Africa and the rest of the Middle East, and they're basically the majority. They're slightly more than half the population. So it's all nuts. But ideology, rules, and when you combine that with anti-Semitism, this is real weird red-green alliance, as we call it, between Marxists and Islamists, and it's very interesting because even as I said, as I started talking about Kamala Harris, and I'm actually in the middle of writing a piece for tomorrow about Kamala Harris's statement. It's like she wants to say something that will appeal to liberal Jewish donors. So she said she supports Israel's right to exist, and what Hamas did is bad. On the other hand, she rolls out all the Hamas talking points and says, Israel's been bad, and she's no longer floating there's a famine in Gaza. She talks about food insecurity. So what? I mean, there's a war going on.
Yeah. Well, right. That's right.
So it's like and she, as I said, she says, it's morally complex. It's not binary, but that's just another way of saying you're neutral about a war between genocidal terrorists and Jews. So there you go.
So let me put it this way. This thing about a ceasefire. Can you imagine what would happen in World War II if people started bitching about the fact that we were killing too many Nazis.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy, but there are other factors. Like, there's pressure within Israel, serious
I
pressure
understand
on
this. Yeah, I know that.
Netanyahu
That's actually the reason I
about the
brought this up.
hostages,
Yeah.
where the hostage families, and listen, if your family member, your loved one was being held hostage, by terrorists, you'd trade the whole world to get them back, and you wouldn't care about the consequences, and that's okay. I mean, you're entitled to have that position. That is combined with sort of the political opposition to Netanyahu, which just wants him out. It's not a question of policies; they just hate him.
Actually, yeah, could you expound on that a little bit, because I'm aware of this, but I don't understand it. I'm not inside there. So, why is he so disliked?
Well, imagine if Bill Clinton were still president of the United States.
Oh, is that the deal? It's been too long.
He's been around forever.
Yeah, I mean, he has. That's right.
He became prime minister the first time in 1996.
Yeah.
And he was 3 years. It was, and he was prime minister from 1996 to 1999. And then he came back in 2009. And except for like a year and a half in 2021 into 22, he's been prime minister ever since then. He's the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history. And, it's honestly, there's much to be said against that from small d Democratic point of view. He is kind of arrogant. Nobody really
Yeah.
He has a core support of people who love him. 25% of the Israeli electorate love him. He's the king of Israel to them, but everybody else is sick of him, including people and parties, because Israel has splinter parties because they have proportional representation. So there's no majority for any one party. Never has been.
Yeah, I got a minute. Can you really quickly explain how this works? I don't quite get that.
When you vote in the parliamentary elections, it's a parliamentary system. But you don't vote for an individual member of Knesset. You vote for a party. You vote for a list.
Got it.
And every list gets it, so long as in the current law is they have to get like 2.5%. Any party that gets more than 2.5% gets that. If you got 4%, you get 4% of the seats.
Yeah,
of the 120 seats. So there are no majorities. Every government is a coalition of of people. But the point is, there are right-wing parties that share Netanyahu's beliefs about the peace process, that led by former associates who know him so well that they really have good reasons to hate him, that just want him out. And there's been lawfare against him by the liberal elites. There was when he came back in at the end of 2022 with a very strong, coherent right-wing majority, and what they said, we're going to reform the judiciary because the Supreme Court in Israel has more power than any set of judges in the world. There's no justiciability, there's no standing. They can rule on anything. They can invalidate any government action under any circumstance, and they basically get to choose their successors. It's not like our system. And basically, that's the one institution that the left in Israel still controls. And so they considered making the system, having some checks and balances on that, to be a war on democracy, which is just gaslighting. It's the exact opposite. So that was the whole thing that happened in 2023, a fight that only ended on October 7th, really. Whenever it had to be put aside, and it was very divisive, and it weakened Israel. The left blames Netanyahu for raising the issue, but of course, they are to blame for basically blowing the country up in order to hold on to their sliver of power. Basically anti-democratic power. So,
how many? I don't even know how many people are in Israel.
There are 9 million altogether. 80% of them are Jewish.
And how many people vote? Like 6 or 7 million, or how many people can vote?
Well, everybody who's over the age of 18 can vote. Yeah. Right. Arab, Jewish, no matter what, and everybody does vote. It's a very high percentage voting country.
Yeah.
Arabs vote, and they're represented in the Knesset by Arab parties that hate Israel. And because it's proportional, the reason why it's such a crazy system. It's it's the opposite of what they have in England with the first past
Right.
the post.
That's what
If you saw, like, Labor won 33% of the vote, and they got 67% of the seats.
Yeah, right.
In Israel, the Likud in the last election was the largest party. They got about 27% of the vote. They only got like 25%. They got 27% of the seats.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Yeah,
so
I know that amazingly people in Israel have been thinking about going to this, or no, in England have been thinking about going to this proportional system because they're kind of tired of, I don't know, nothing's perfect.
Well, the people on the losing end of that, like
Yeah,
the Reform Party, Nigel Farage wants it.
Right.
As our columnist Melanie Phillips, who also writes for the Times of London, points out, that would just mean like the Greens and like the Islamists would have huge say. Be careful what you wish for.
Right.
Israel's system is crazy. Britain's system is crazy. But they're each crazy in different ways. Britain's system worked as long as there were two major parties. It's breaking down because there are no longer just two major parties.
Yeah.
We have our system with the Electoral College. I mean, by comparison to what goes on in England, in Britain, the Electoral College seems very fair.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. And actually, speaking of that, you wrote a piece on JNS about everyone in America is talking about unity and how you didn't think it was going to happen. And my counter to that, if you want to call it that, is that I'm not certain unity is a completely good idea. Do you?
Well, if as Molly Hemingway, my editor, the editor-in-chief of the Federalist, where I also sometimes write, likes to say, most calls for unity are just calls for conservatives to surrender.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, but that's not even what I'm talking about here, but go ahead. Yeah.
Unity is great. And I listen, I go around America, I talk to people, I'm a journalist. Most Americans hate the way the elites and the chattering classes have us at each other's throats. They understand that people are profiting from this division and it's not them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the problem is that we are in such a bifurcated political culture. I mentioned before, we read, watch, listen, different sets of media. Therefore, we have two different sets of facts about everything. It's like, if you watch Fox News and read conservative media and the other conservative, it's like you were not surprised you were perfectly aware that Joe Biden was incompetent.
Yeah.
If you read the New York Times and watch MSNBC, you only found out about it at the debate in last month.
Yeah.
And it was very shocking.
I don't know about you. I know friends that was really true. They were shocked what they saw.
Yeah. People who basically only read the New York Times or, publications like that, they're among the least informed people in the world right now. So we're so divided. Social media, which is where most people get their news, through their news feeds, let's be honest, Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, all the others, that's where people are. That's where the eyeball, and TikTok, that's where the eyeballs are. That's why every journalist has to be on social media. It's like they're not coming to you. You have to go to them.
Yeah.
Social media allows us, both the algorithms that they create and also our actions. People create feeds where their pre-existing prejudices and opinions are reinforced and never contradicted. And when they're confronted with an opposing opinion, what do? They delete it. They unfriend the person. They their hair gets on fire. That's the nature of our political culture. And the people who own, the public square, the virtual public square, because we don't coexist anymore in actual public squares so much, they profit from this division. That's and it's it's just a function of how their apps work. So when you speak of unity, I mean, it's very hard to have unity, even with the best of wills. If you're a Democrat today, most Democrats, I'm not going to, a lot of people on the left, let's just say this.
Okay.
I want to be careful of how I say this.
All right.
Really do believe that Trump is an authoritarian, a Hitler wannabe, a fascist, and that if he wins again, it's the end of democracy.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're being told every day. Why wouldn't they believe it? by the
I
people
know.
that they trust.
Well,
Um,
Trump has an additional problem, and that there's to a certain number of people, he's just plain unlikable. I mean, regardless of
on the
politics.
other hand, to a certain number of people, he's the most lovable politician they've ever seen.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's lovable so much as the fact
Oh
that
my gosh, the love for
no,
Donald Trump.
it exists. But my point is, I think it's largely because some people, many people, perceive his one term as quite successful.
Well, that's true, but I think it's deeper than that. I mean,
Okay.
his successful one term convinced many people, and I'll include myself in that as a conservative. In 2016, I didn't see any reason why Donald Trump, what I didn't see the argument for Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
wasn't a conservative. He had never been a conservative. Why would he keep all these promises? Why would he do anything that conservatives actually wanted? And also, he was kind of a scoundrel. I mean, he was not somebody, that I was. I mean, I come from a working class background, but I'm among the educated. I went to a fancy college on scholarship, and he doesn't, he's not from he offends the manners.
Right.
Now, I was convinced by his policies. I was also convinced by the lawfare, by the Russia collusion hoax and everything that the other side did against him. That convinced me that I'm obviously more on his side. So, but I think there were all the people that voted but of course he didn't win in 2016 with the votes of people like me. He won with the votes of people who thought that he was representing their point of view.
Yeah.
That he spoke to them, the working class of this country that had been betrayed by both political parties.
Right.
That had jointly hollowed out our manufacturing base, that had presided over, basically the destruction of the working class, and the contempt, and had contempt for the working class. Yes, Hillary Clinton talked about deplorables, but George W. Bush and all the never Trump elites, the people like, the Bill Kristols and the Brett Stevens, I could go through the whole list of people that I used to be sort of on good terms with. They didn't have much, And the Wall Street, which wanted mass immigration and wanted trade deals that hurt this country, hurt the people in this country. Trump spoke to the people who were the victims of this, and who weren't necessarily Republican voters.
Yeah.
In the past, Republicans gave them social conservatism and liberal globalist economics, and the Democrats offered free stuff for the very poor, which the working class doesn't want. They want to work. Left-wing, social policies. Now the Democrats are the party of the credentialed elites and the very poor. And under Trump has remade the Republican Party to be the party of the working class. That's the whole J.D. Vance. And that's everything that he stands for, and which is not doctrinaire social conservative on issues that social conservatives care most about, and is not favorable to Wall Street, much as he wants a booming economy and he wants a deregulation that will help job creation and wealth creation. But his stands on trade, which were anathema to most Republicans, speak to a question of, okay, you say you're a conservative. What is it that you want to conserve? Do you want, are you in favor of conserving communities, the dignity of working people who work, to make things from their hands, who don't code or aren't journalists like me or aren't academics or aren't people on Wall Street? Do you want to conserve communities for them? That's what being a conservative, that's what Edmund Burke wrote about in the 18th century. That's what conservatism really is about.
Right.
It's not just liberal economics, because, the globalist economics that we've gotten since NAFTA is not what Adam Smith was writing about. It's about like just basically hollowing out this country, which is a national security issue as much as anything else, because the people who want to fight wars abroad, many of whom are people that I have always been friendly with, and the people who think Ukraine is the most important thing in the world, if we're going to manufacture all the weapons that Ukraine wants to continue their unwinnable war, this World War I trench warfare stalemate that's going on in eastern Ukraine, and support our allies like Israel and Taiwan and defend ourselves. We can't do that. It's not 1942. We don't have the manufacturing capacity anymore.
Jonathan, let me ask you about this, because on this show I don't talk about Ukraine much, because I gotta admit I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't know what to think. Like, for example, the Israel Hamas thing is very clear to me, but I don't know what to think about Ukraine. I really don't. So what, especially how it relates to the Israeli Hamas war, what do you think? What's going on with Ukraine with you? How do you look at it?
Number one, it has nothing to do with the war that Iran and its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis are waging against Israel. Let's be very clear about that. It's a conflict between two national groups in the Eastern Europe, the Ukrainians and the Russians. A conflict that's been going on a long time. It's about Putin wanting to rebuild the Russian Empire, or the semblance of it, and to at least maintain, sort of a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. And the Ukrainians want independence, and it's a stalemate. There is there is a two-state, the two-state solution, which in theory would be the rational solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Israel and the, in theory, it is the most rational, as we started off in our conversation by saying. The problem is Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They've never wanted a two-state solution. They're opposed to the existence of Israel under any circumstances. There is a two-state solution between Russia and Ukraine. And, if, Ukraine has defended its independence, but if the war is going to continue because they want to hold on to, they want to get back the places they lost in 2014 when Putin invaded and nobody in America cared about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Nobody cared about it.
Right. That's correct.
That's not a U.S. interest. Having the Eastern Donbass be part of Ukraine, and having Crimea, which, the indigenous people of Crimea were thrown out of Crimea by Stalin. It's like, it's not Ukrainian. It's not really Russian either. But, it's like, that's not a national interest of the United States. That is not worth hundreds of billions of dollars. People complain about the aid that has gone to Israel in the last 40 years. Ukraine has gotten more money in the last 2 years than Israel's gotten in the last 4 decades. 3.8 billion a year, almost all of which goes to Israel, which almost all of which is spent in the United States, I might add. It's an aid program for the U.S. arms industry.
Of course it is, right.
For Raytheon and all the other manufacturers, and God bless them, Israel needs those arms.
Yeah.
We gave, in the last year, we gave 150 billion to Ukraine, and it's not really, most of it is not spent here, and most of it is not really accountable, because Ukraine is, although, everybody has now adopted the idea that Zelensky is Churchill, and that Ukraine is defending democracy. Zelensky certainly has Churchillian aspects, because he rallied his people to defeat and to hold on against Russia. Yeah. And that's praiseworthy. The Ukrainian people have a right to self-determination and independence, but they're not, it's not a perfect democratic country. It's still a corrupt, anti-democratic country. Right. God bless them. Let them live in independence. I don't wish them ill at all. I wish them peace. Continuing this war just kills people. Yeah. And there is no solution. Ukraine is not going to defeat Russia.
And that's the reason I don't talk about it.
Money and arms in the world. Russia is not going to be abolished as a European power and as a nuclear power.
No.
And we should not let Ukraine be abolished either. So there's a solution there. And I think Trump, he will find it, because it is a deal that can be made if Putin can be persuaded to take his winnings and to accept his lumps. And the Ukrainians, should be, content with defending their independence.
Yes.
That's what I think about Ukraine. It has nothing to do with Israel. And, and tying it to Israel is just a political tactic. And let's understand, Democrats fell in love with Ukraine in the last few years. That, before that, it's the first war that Democrats have liked since World War II.
Yeah.
They've been opposed to every war since World War II. They like this war because Ukraine was bound up with the first impeachment of Trump, and they think being pro-Ukrainian is anti-Trump.
Yeah.
There's a certain faction of the Republican Party, basically the Washington division of the, Mitch McConnell and the DC establishment, not the voters. Therefore, because
it's like Cold War nostalgia. They think it's 1987 and the forces of the Warsaw Pact are poised to overrun all of Western Europe. And they're poised to pour through the Fulda Gap, between East Germany and West Germany.
Yeah.
And the only thing standing in their way is the U.S.
Mr.
7th Armored Corps and U.S.
war.
nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And that's not the situation now. Russia couldn't conquer, and we hear this, well, if they conquer Ukraine, they'll conquer the rest of Europe. Russia couldn't conquer Ukraine when Ukraine wasn't even being aided. So
that's pretty obvious
nonsense.
Now, right? Yeah.
It's absolutely nonsense. Listen, some Republicans, and I say this, and I'm saying it with love, people on my side of the spectrum, they're for any war. You wave the flag, most Republicans will say, yep, I'm for that. Let's go. Let's march. The thing is, we are involved in sort of a new Cold War against China and China's allies. And Russia is a Chinese ally.
Yeah.
And Iran is a Chinese ally of sorts.
Yes.
And people say, well, that's the argument for pouring all this, blood and treasure into Ukraine, because that's, it's a new proxy war. We're fighting the new Cold War. But I'm old enough, not that old, but I'm old enough to know and remember that not as much as the Cold War against the Soviet Union, against the evil empire, aptly named by Ronald Reagan, defeated by Ronald Reagan. Not every proxy war during the course of the Cold War was a good idea. I mentioned Vietnam. That was a bad idea. Right. Not every war. It's like every time we're faced with a foreign dilemma, it's like, is it Vietnam or is it Munich? Is it shameless appeasement, or is it, foolhardy adventure?
Yeah.
And we go back and forth in this country in our views about foreign policy between people who are afraid of being Neville Chamberlain and people who are afraid of being Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
The thing is, we shouldn't want to be either.
Uh-huh.
We should not appease, like Iran is a genuine threat. They're really trying to kill us.
Yeah. So let me hold it. Let me ask you about that. So you got the Iran using Hamas basically as proxy, and Blinken comes on the tube 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he says the Iranians are 2 to 3 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. Now, I have there's a guy who calls in my show from Singapore, and he's an Iranian journalist, and he says no, and he says what I'm thinking. No, they already have one, and he says by October they're going to have 100 bombs, and I believe that. So the question becomes, if Iran has enough bombs, will they just start dropping them on Israel?
Iran is definitely a threshold nuclear power. I'll take you back to the week before October 7th. The week before October 7th, there was a Friday news dump by the Department of Defense. Friday news dumps. Friday afternoon, press release then, nobody's going to pay attention.
Right.
The Department of Defense released, a finding that the DoD thought that Iran was only basically 2 weeks away from having enough fissile material to build a bomb.
Right.
So this is old news. What Blinken said is old news.
Right. That's right.
Now, there is a difference between them having the capability, which they have gradually moved closer for, in which they've gone leaps and bounds since Biden removed listen, Obama's appeasement in 2015, the nuclear deal, moved them much closer to having a nuclear weapon because it basically guaranteed that they would eventually have one. Biden's lifting of Trump's sanctions, which would have had a chance to sort of bring them to their knees and force them to give up their nuclear program, in theory. We don't know how it would have worked out, but that was the goal, and it was a reasonable goal. Biden gave them another push, and all the money that he sent in for unfreezing funds has given them a push. They're a threshold nuclear power. Now, do I believe they're going to have 100 bombs by the end of the year? I don't believe they've assembled a single bomb.
Okay.
I think they have the capability to do so fairly quickly. They know that if they do assemble a bomb, they're going to trigger a possible Western response. At this stage, it's in their interest not to say they have a nuclear bomb, but to just build up the power. And that gives them the ability to threaten other countries without incurring the wrath or the potential wrath of the West. So, or Israel having to do something to make a preemptive attack. So there's this, and that's enabled them, and all the money that they've gotten and the lifting of sanctions enables them to fund international terrorism, which they're doing. They are the world's leading state sponsor of terror, have been for a long time. And we help to finance that through Obama's policies and Biden's policies. And the fruits of that have been seen, most prominently since October, on October 7th and everything that's happened since.
So Obama gives Iran all this money, or actually technically released a lot of their own money, but they got it back. And I've never been able to understand that. It looks so stupid to me, but it's now finally been explained to me that his idea or his theory was that he wanted to build up Iran so that Iran and Israel basically had some sort of like military or moral equality or something like that, and so that there'd be that's the stupidest thing to me ever. But
it's morally obtuse, is what it was.
Yeah,
it really was. I mean, he famously said he wanted Iran to get right with the world. He wanted to reorient American foreign policy from traditional allies like Israel and the Saudis, and to reach out through this new America willing to apologize for everything it had done in the past that was now anti-imperialist America, would be friendly with the new Iran, and that would allow for a new, correlation of forces that would be, in his mind, more stable and more just. And what that was a formula for international terrorism, chaos and instability and bloodshed, and it was deeply, deeply wrong.
Yeah, and so do you have to be just on an effete intellectual to not understand how stupid that is?
Well, you have to be an intellect. You have to be a leftist intellectual.
Yeah,
to think that the U.S. and its allies are basically wrong, and then undermining them is, putting yourself on the right side of history. That's a mistake, and we're paying for that. And
yeah,
but it plays into this desire of many people on the left to sort of apologize for America, to not believe in America. It's part of, again, the same ideological construct where we started off. You asked me what's causing these people to demonstrate in the streets, basically to allow a terrorist movement to survive. It plays itself out in many ways. It's kind of this war on the West, on Western civilization, that plays itself out, in our politics, in our foreign policy, and in our culture as well.
Yeah.
It's really at the root of all of our problems.
This is I'm going to be accused of being a racist for saying this. I don't care. But one of the problems that Israel has is that all the other countries in the Middle East are, for all practical purposes, 200 years behind us.
Well, they are hindered by they haven't embraced modernism, a modern Western way of life, and with all that's what the changes that have gone on in Saudi Arabia over the last 15 years, as the Prince MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, is trying to drag it into the 20th century,
I understand
the 21st century. Right. And he's that's at the core of what he wants to do, and that's why he's not really at war. Saudis haven't formally recognized Israel, but the Abraham Accords happened because the Saudis said okay to it.
Yeah.
And so he understands Israel's not a threat to him, not a threat to the Saudis. Iran is.
Right.
Iran is a threat to all the Sunni Arab states, and that's what they want. And he wants to make make his country more modern, better able to defend itself, have a modern economy. It's a struggle because Islam is a real hindrance. Political Islamist ideology,
I understand
is
that,
focused in different directions. There's never been a reformation there, and obviously I'm not making a statement against a religion. I'm saying the culture of these countries have held them back, have locked them in a war against the West, and hatred for Israel in particular. Some of them have gotten over that, which is what the Abraham Accords is about, and what Biden dropped the ball by not concentrating on doing that, instead of returning to Obama's plan for his goal of appeasing Iran. But that's where we are. We are here. We are where we are because of actual plans and ideas People, when Biden was being pushed off the cliff by Democratic elites, and they wanted him to withdraw, and eventually they got their way by one measure or another. And they're all praising him as a great president. He's the greatest president of our lifetimes.
Oh,
they
yeah.
were snowing him under with this
I know.
sincere praise. Truth is, he is a failed president.
No
He's a
shit.
failed president at home on a border that's porous, that is an
You're preaching
invasion
to the choir, my
hurt
friend.
Americans, an economy that hurts Americans, and in foreign policy, he has left a world in flames.
Yes, I know.
And it didn't happen by accident. It was not an act of God. It was the result of his weakness and of his bad policies.
I've compared often him to Jimmy Carter, and the comparison is that, well, Carter in some ways was handed a bad hand. I mean,
Kim Strassel of the Wall Street Journal wrote a whole book about that analogy, and it's a good book, and it's a very strong analogy.
I didn't know about that. That's good. Yeah, no, that's the difference. Biden caused all this stuff, So
Yes.
Anyway, let's end with this. What do you think is going to happen with a war with Hamas?
Well, Hamas is on its last legs in Gaza. It has looked all along for the West and Biden to save it. Israel has been hampered by American pressure from going as quickly as it could, but it is near the end of finishing off Hamas. And the question is, will it be, if Hamas had accepted a ceasefire and released all the hostages, the pressure on Netanyahu to end the war months ago would have been too great for him to resist.
Right.
They still have that capacity, but they're so ideological, they can't help themselves. They just want to fight and kill Jews. They want to create as many martyrs as possible.
They do.
So for me to predict whether they will accept a deal that basically grants them, a lifeline, allows them to succeed and to declare victory, really, because if they're still standing when this war is over, then they won.
Yeah. Right.
That would be a catastrophe for Israel, even if the hostages were all returned, which is not clear that they would be. And it's not clear how many of them are still alive either. And that's Benjamin Netanyahu's dilemma. He's got to balance what's good for the country as opposed to what's good for the hostages and the families. And, greater men than him, people like Ronald Reagan, foundered on that kind of equation when it came to hostages being held and whether you should pay ransom. He's being asked to pay a ransom that is Israel's security. That's what Kamala Harris is basically saying. There should be a ceasefire and Israel should leave Gaza, as if to say that, Gaza will go back to where it was on October 6th. That will be a disaster for Israeli security. It will also mean that Hamas effectively is the leader of the Palestinians, both in the West Bank, where there hasn't, Mahmoud Abbas is the president of the Palestinian Authority. He's currently serving in the 19th year of the 4-year term to which he was elected. Right. The reason why he hasn't had another election is because he knows he would lose to Hamas. He's known that for a decade or more. That's even more true now. Hamas is more popular than ever. Don't believe anyone who tells you that there's a distinction.
We have to bring this up for the viewers. The last poll I saw said that 75% of the Palestinians were support of Hamas,
and the atrocities of October 7th.
Yeah,
so that tells you everything you need to know about Palestinian political culture. That's a tragedy for the Palestinians as well as Israelis.
Yes,
they have brought this horrible destruction and all these deaths, and the statistics about deaths. That tens of thousands of children, as if everybody who gets killed is a child, instead of the majority of them have actually been combatants, terrorists who have been killed. Israel takes more care to avoid civilian casualties than any other country, and to say the otherwise is just Hamas propaganda. And that's what's so wrong about Biden and Harris echoing those points. But the point is, if you allow them to succeed, it means that Hamas basically controls the Palestinian narrative for the foreseeable future. If you have any theoretical hope for peace on any terms, you should want Hamas eradicated, a complete and total defeat. And yet, that is what the people who say they want peace are doing everything to avoid.
And that's plainly obvious to me. But you're right. I know a lot of people. I don't know. It's like people forget I'm playing master of the obvious here. People forget who started this war.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Or don't care.
Yeah, or don't care. You're right, Jonathan. I can't thank you enough. This was fascinating. I hope you'll come on again.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, you take care. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just pushing buttons. That was Jonathan Tobin. He's a editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, and that's at jns.org. And we'll put a link up to that and to his writing there too. He writes columns. He does a. I was going to ask him about that. I never did. He does a podcast called Think Twice. He has some pretty good guests on there. I think there's video to that and not just audio. I'm not sure, but we'll put that up too. So that'll be on our. We'll put that on our blog this weekend. That's at jimandknight.com. So this is part 3 of our show. So what's part 3? That's where we talk about paranormal stuff, the UFO stuff. And I don't really have UFO stuff today, and just plain weird crap. So this was in New Jersey. So a large fish. This is just so stupid. A large fish fell out of the sky and hit the windshield of a Tesla and bounced off and shattered the Tesla windshield. A fish fell out of the sky. Just thought you'd want to know that. That was in New Jersey, where only that could happen. Holy Christ! And then this was I was going to mention this at the top of the show, and I got sidetracked about the fact that during Biden's speech last night, which was from 8 to 8:15 Eastern time, and I gotta admit I don't know what time zone this was. Just before that, about a half an hour before he went on, Russian and Chinese fighters buzzed northern Alaska. Now, the NORAD made a point to say here that I'm going to read this. They said the Russian and PRC aircraft remained in international airspace and did not enter American or Canadian sovereign airspace. So it did not enter that, and they did send 2 Raptors to intercept them. But there was no exchange of gunfire or any of that sort of stuff. But the amazing thing about this is it's the very first time the Russians and the Chinese have buzzed America together. That was the real amazing thing about this. And it happened a half an hour or so before Biden's speech. And it's hard to think that's coincidental. You know, it's basically, I think I look at that basically as a giant FU to the old man. That's what I think that was. So, nothing really happened. They just want to let you know, but it's the very first time they've ever flown together, Russia and China. And finally, this is actually pretty cool. The U.S. Air Force has commissioned a drone called XQ-67A. And the interesting thing, first of all, I was going to put a picture up. I didn't get around to it. Sorry about that. The real amazing thing about this is that, first of all, it's a pretty cool looking aircraft, but this drone is programmed to be able to fly completely on its own, including making decisions. In other words, there's AI built into it. So it can accommodate or accompany a manned aircraft on missions, and also you could just send it off and have it drop bombs and shit. And so then the question is, and this article I was reading, I can't remember where this was, but they asked us too, that doesn't that fundamentally change the idea of warfare if you don't have to risk any personnel to actually go and basically take care of a mission that used to be done by people, And so if the other side ends up doing that, then you're basically fighting a video war. It's a video game, right? No one's really getting killed, but the thing is, you would know when you lost, because that's the point where people could get killed, I just find the whole thing fascinating. But anyway, apparently this drone is pretty cool. So you can either control it remotely, guy in a truck, 3,000 miles away. I don't understand. I know that the military has its own internet. I know that, and it's pretty it's secretive. They don't talk about it, but I know they do. What I don't understand is how they got rid of latency. That's what I apparently there's no latency at all, and I don't understand how they did that. Now I don't know if Ashton Forbes was on the show last night, and this was really fascinating. First of all, his interview was 90 minutes, and I don't know if you saw it. It was on Rumble. Go back last night's show. Um, I did not have to stretch to ask him a single question. It was a fascinating conversation. He put up graphs, charts, videos. We were showing all sorts of stuff on the screen. His contention is that Malaysia Flight 370 that took off from Kuala Lumpur Airport on, I think it was March 9th, 2014, and was never seen again. His contention is that either as a rescue mission or as an actual deliberate plan, the U.S. military teleported that aircraft in midair to another location. And he doesn't pretend to know where the other location is. He has some guesses. He has some speculations or scenarios about what might have happened, but that's entirely speculation on his part. He has two videos that show these drones going around this airplane, and it's pretty obvious it's that airplane, because that airplane, and this has been verified, had 430 pounds of lithium batteries in the cargo hold, and they probably started on fire. And that's probably what started this whole thing. So, anyway, I bring that up because technology, the military has so much technology we never even hear of. So they have their own internet that has no latency at all, because you couldn't run these drones and drop bombs with precision if you had any latency whatsoever. I mean, that it had to be less than a millisecond, you know. So, and I don't know if you know this, but basically, the average person can't discern any time less than 300 milliseconds. That's instantaneous to you. So it's not, of course, instantaneous at all, but it is in terms of human experience. 300 milliseconds happens to you simultaneously. So you can't parse time in your body can't less than that. So anyway, this drone apparently is just really incredible. You can fly it remotely via joystick, or you can literally just give it some instructions and tell it to go on its way, and it will do the mission on its own via AI. It's pretty incredible stuff. So I want to thank once again. I want to thank Jonathan Tobin for coming on. That was a really interesting conversation. He answered a lot of questions I had. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So we don't do Fridays here. We don't have a show tomorrow night. We're back on Monday. We got our month in review panel. Like maybe Don, maybe Tim, maybe Larry. We'll see. We'll figure it out. I haven't talked to those guys yet, so I don't know. Tuesday we got a guy, Tom Palladino. He's coming on. He's going to talk about scalar light therapy and research. I don't know what that's about either. We'll find out together. I'll do some research. I promise you, I'll do some research over the weekend. And next Wednesday, our 1-year anniversary. And this will show 140. So that one ended up being for show 143. So if we're going to do a count, if we're doing 4 days a week here, we would do 200 shows in a year, realistically, with a couple weeks off. And of course, I took a bunch of time off because of my hip surgery. And if we're talking about show 143, that means we're batting about 3 shows a week. Yay! I don't know. Whatever. Life is crazy, huh? Okay, so I'm going to end here. Even though we got a call, somebody's calling, but I'm just going to end. We're too late now. Sorry about that. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie, and good night to you wherever you are. I'll see you. I'll see you next Monday. Take care, everybody. Have a nice weekend.